When we picture the ancient world, we see empires carved from stone. We look to the great monuments of Giza, structures engineered to outlast time itself through sheer weight and rigidity. Our understanding of these early civilizations is built almost entirely on the objects they could not break. We fill modern museums with hardened bronze swords, armor, and clay tablets. This reliance on indestructible artifacts creates a survivor bias in our history books. It hides the biological substance that actually powered the technology of antiquity. Long before the extraction of petroleum or the invention of synthetic plastics, beeswax provided early engineers with a highly specific set of physical properties. It naturally repelled water, it was endlessly impressionable, and reacted instantly to temperature shifts. Ancient empires utilized beeswax as a metaphysical technology, using these unique physical behaviors to blur the line between the animate and the inanimate. Wax is uniquely capable of capturing the minute, fragile details of human features. Its translucency mimics the texture of living flesh, providing a material foundation for beliefs regarding creation and the preservation of life. In Egyptian cosmology, this biological origin was sacred. Theological texts record that when the sun god Re wept, his tears struck the soil and turned into bees, making their wax a direct deposit of divine solar power. We see this energy wielded in the Westcar Papyrus, a Middle Kingdom manuscript recording ancient magic. The text details a priest who casts a wax crocodile into a pool. Upon contact with water, the figurine transforms into a living, 7-cubit-long beast to seize an intruder. This same principle of animation was applied in mortuary cults. Priests crafted wax amulets of the Bennu bird, a symbol of the call that summoned life into the world, and placed them in tombs to stimulate the deceased's rebirth. By yielding so easily to human hands, malleability made wax the ultimate medium for creation, effectively allowing mortals to shape and manipulate life forces. The inverse of creation is destruction. Because wax melts easily under heat, it became the ancient world's primary instrument for neutralizing its enemies. In Egyptian execration rituals and Mesopotamian Maqli ceremonies, practitioners modeled their rivals in wax and cast them into fire, believing the physical destruction of the image caused a corresponding spiritual reaction in the real-world target. Across the Mediterranean, the Greeks observed this same thermal fragility, but they adapted the physical failure of wax into a cautionary mythology about human limitation. To escape the Cretan labyrinth, the master craftsman Daedalus engineered a pair of wings for his son, Icarus. He constructed the frames using feathers, leather straps, and an adhesive binding of raw beeswax. When Icarus climbs too high, the sun's heat pushes the wax past its thermal threshold. The binding softens, feathers scatter, and the structure collapses. In both spellcasting and epic myth, the chemical breakdown of wax acted as an instrument of cosmic correction. It proved that easily constructed power is just as easily destroyed. Beyond its malleability and its melting point, wax possessed a third critical trait: its viscosity. Ancient practitioners realized this dense, adhesive consistency could form a hermetic seal against sensory input. The Hittites of ancient Anatolia encoded this utility into the myth of their missing agricultural god, Telepinu. When Telepinu flies into a rage, he abandons the world, taking all growth and fertility with him. To save humanity, a single tiny bee finds the sleeping god and stings him awake. It then meticulously smears wax over his eyes and feet, a ritual act of purification designed to physically seal and absorb his destructive elemental anger. This concept of a protective physical barrier appears hundreds of miles away in Homer's Odyssey, when Odysseus must navigate past the island of the Sirens. Following the advice of the enchantress Circe, Odysseus kneads beeswax in the sun to soften it. He then firmly packs the wax into the ears of every crew member, creating an impenetrable acoustic wall against the siren songs. Because of its dense viscosity, wax acted as a metaphysical shield, capable of insulating fragile mortals from overwhelming supernatural forces. It is a paradox that we named an entire era of human development after its most famous surviving material, bronze. The creation of the era's complex tools and statues was entirely dependent on the physical properties of beeswax. Smiths would first sculpt an object in pure wax, then encase it in an outer layer of clay. The clay mold is heated until the wax interior liquefies and drains away entirely. The smith then pours molten bronze into the perfect negative void left behind. In this process, the wax is inherently sacrificed. It is burned and degraded, leaving behind only the enduring metal it helped to shape. The monumental ruins of ancient empires were built on this quiet, ephemeral labor. The material that captures the history is the material that is gone. The survival of the ancient world's hardest artifacts depended on the adaptable, ephemeral wax that was deliberately sacrificed to the forge. Pop culture conditions us to think of magic as a whimsical tool of fantasy, a world of wands, spells, and heroic adventure. But in the ancient Mediterranean and Near East, the practice of magic was a brutal, physical struggle for survival. In the Bronze Age, humanity lived at the mercy of unpredictable forces. A sudden fever, an invading army, or an unrequited obsession could ruin a life instantly. People required a mechanism to exert control over an environment that offered none. Practitioners utilized a formalized material technology integrated into daily life from the lowest commoners in the street to the pharaohs of Egypt. Opening the ancient grimoire reveals 3 authentic spells, rituals that functioned as calculated attempts to impose order on a chaotic universe. During the Old Kingdom period in ancient Egypt, the highest levels of the state integrated magical operations directly into their military defense apparatus. The primary tools for this defense were execration texts. These were physical objects, typically unbaked clay jars or small statuettes, specifically sculpted to resemble bound foreign captives. Priests wrote the names of rival leaders, hostile foreign states, or suspected internal traitors directly onto the chests of these figures, using red ink. The operation required physical activation. Priests deliberately smashed, burned, and buried the objects in designated pits near state borders. Egyptian state rituals functioned as a preemptive supernatural strike. By physically breaking a proxy that bore their enemy's name, the state aimed to neutralize an opponent's actual military power before an invasion could begin. Moving east to Neo-Assyrian Mesopotamia, the focus of protective rituals narrows from national defense to community preservation, specifically targeting the invisible threat of witchcraft. Their primary defense was the Maklu, or burning series, an extensive anti-witchcraft ritual recorded on clay tablets. Held overnight, the victim formally petitioned Shamash, the sun god of justice, to hear their case. The exorcists leading the trial manufactured effigies of the witch using highly combustible materials, including tallow, dough, and beeswax. At the climax of the ceremony, these effigies were cast into a bronze crucible and subjected to fire. As the wax and tallow melted, the victim recited specific curses, calling for the witch's life to end as the figure dissolved. Magicians across the ancient world regularly exploited the radical, shape-shifting properties of wax. In the Egyptian Westcar papyrus, a lector priest uses a small wax crocodile that expands into a living predator to eliminate his rival. The Maklu series illustrates that ancient magic was a procedural system, a method of invoking cosmic law to neutralize a threat. Centuries later in Roman Egypt, the mechanics of magic were applied to a far more intimate objective, enforcing personal desire. The Greek magical papyri contain numerous recipes for binding spells, called katadesmoi. These rites were engineered to enact violent coercion. Archaeological evidence confirms these recipes were actively practiced. An artifact currently held in the Louvre features a clay female doll sculpted on her knees, with her hands firmly bound behind her back. The physical mechanics required by the spell were engineered to inflict pain. The practitioner pierced the doll with 13 pins to cause phantom aches in the victim's body and bind her autonomy. These bound figures were sealed inside vases alongside inscribed lead curse tablets. The text functioned as a legal demand to chthonic deities, ordering them to deny the victim food, water, or sleep until she submitted. In this context, love magic was a weaponized ritual designed to dismantle a victim's free will. The shattered Egyptian jars, melted Assyrian wax, and pierced Roman dolls operate through sympathetic magic. This is the belief that manipulating a physical proxy alters reality's corresponding state. What is done to the miniature is immediately done to the target. These spells provide a direct view into the landscape of ancient human anxiety. These meticulous physical procedures were the mechanisms of survival for a vast cross-section of humanity. Paranoid pharaohs securing their borders, sick Assyrians hunting their attackers, and desperate Romans demanding affection. The ancient grimoire reveals that the core fears, insecurities, and desires of humanity have remained consistent for 4,000 years. Only the tools we use to manage them have changed. Approaching the shores of Crete, the Argonauts were violently repelled by a colossal bronze giant hurling massive boulders at their ship. This was Talos. He is often categorized as a standard mythological monster, but his 2,500-year-old origins presented an enigma that baffled ancient poets and engineers alike. Some classical traditions describe him as an automaton. In this view, Talos was a brazen machine forged in the divine workshops of Hephaestus and programmed to patrol the island's perimeter. Other scholars rejected a mechanical origin. They argued Talos was biological, the final surviving member of a primordial bronze race that grew from ancient ash trees long before the era of heroes. In the Cretan dialect, the word Talos translates to sun. This identifies the giant as a localized solar god, later absorbed into the worship of Solar Zeus on the island's mountain peaks. These conflicting accounts suggest that the true nature of the guardian lies beyond the poetry, within the historical and scientific realities of the ancient Mediterranean. By stripping away the magic, we can look for the specific historical events that could have inspired the image of a patrolling bronze giant. A text attributed to Plato offers a mundane explanation. Talos was a human magistrate who traveled through Crete enforcing royal laws. Because he carried heavy bronze tablets inscribed with the legal code, the oral tradition eventually transformed the man himself into metal. Other scholars look to the ritual sacrifices of the Near East. In these cults, victims were placed onto the outstretched, downward-sloping hands of bronze idols and consumed by fires burning beneath the statue. This fiery embrace is traced back to Sardinia, where a ritual once dictated the execution of the elderly when they could no longer support themselves. To facilitate these deaths, victims ingested the neurotoxic hemlock waterdropwort. The plant caused fatal facial muscle spasms, pulling the lips back into a dramatic, wide-eyed grimace known as the sardonic grin. These memories of ritual sacrifice and neurotoxic execution eventually merged. They evolved into the mechanics of a bronze monster that burned invaders alive. Approaching the myth through the eyes of an engineer reveals that the giant's anatomy may be a literal record of the lost wax bronze casting process. In this process, known as cire perdue, a clay core is coated in wax and encased in a plaster shell. When heated, the wax drains away, leaving a hollow cavity to receive molten metal. The giant's internal anatomy mirrors this industrial setup. A single vein running down to his ankle represents the casting sprue. The divine E-core represents the molten bronze flowing inside. The bronze ankle nail matches a chaplet pin, the metal spacer securing the inner clay core. Robert Graves proposed that the entire myth grew from a misinterpretation of icons, showing the goddess Athena demonstrating these casting techniques. The internal structure of the giant serves as a narrative record of the work occurring inside an ancient industrial foundry. Historian Adrian Mayer approaches the myth through a futurist lens, examining how the giant's design parallels modern robotics. She notes that Talos functioned as an autonomous weapon operating on a specific logic. If a ship approaches, throw stones. If intruders land, execute them. This reflects the concept of biotechny, or life through craft. It is an ancient realization that intelligence and autonomy could be housed in non-biological forms. By combining a manufactured metallic body with a divine power source, the myth envisions a hybrid entity, a true cyborg. Long before the birth of computer science, ancient thinkers used these legends to explore the ethics and functional boundaries of engineered intelligence. This left the Argonauts with a modern technological problem. How do you destroy an invulnerable, artificially intelligent machine? The sorceress Medea bypassed his bronze exterior by hacking his internal logic. She used psychotropic drugs and hypnotic suggestion to disrupt the automaton's cognitive functions. She exploited an emergent, human-like fear of death, persuading the machine to voluntarily open his own system in exchange for a false promise of immortality. When the ankle pin was dislodged, the ichor drained away like molten lead. The system suffered a total failure, and the giant collapsed. Alternative accounts offer a physical explanation, suggesting the Argonaut Poeas disabled the vulnerable ankle vein with a well-aimed ballistic strike. Whether he was a misremembered judge or an ancient cyborg, the giant's end remains a timeless warning. Even the most advanced systems possess a fatal flaw waiting to be exploited.